Hey everyone, my name's Tyler. I am the creative arts pastor at First Capital Christian Church in Corydon, Indiana. And recently we have been having some major success with our online campus. And so I thought I would do a pretty quick video to show you guys how we mix our services in post. And so here we go. I'll be mixing out of Pro Tools. If you notice, there's Logic also open, and it's just to get the audio to this video. So we're using Pro Tools. The way that we track is we use 16 channels to track, and we do the tracking in a different session than the mixing. So my first step would be to import all of this data from the tracking session, and I just drag it into the mixing section. So that's pretty easy. But I'm going to just give you guys a quick rundown. I use an approach called Browerizing, and it's pretty famous. The guy who made it is famous for mixing Coldplay and some people like that, and he uses a really interesting technique on Mixbus. So that's usually where I start. So here you have my master bus, and I use kind of a top-down approach to mixing. So I kind of start from the end with getting the best sound as I possibly can, and then I move to individual instruments. So let me go ahead and bypass everything, and then I will show you guys what it sounds like. So this is just the raw tracks. Running out of hardware here, and so yeah, it's pretty raw. It doesn't really sound great, but let me show you what I start with. So first thing I do is I add some stereo widening, and so I can't stress how important it is to start with the top down. Since I switched to this approach, it really has helped my mixes. And so the first thing that I like to do is use this. If it's a free plugin by Brainworks, it's called BX Solo, and it really just kind of widens everything out. So let me let you hear that. If you go past anything higher than 150, it pretty much sounds super artificial, so I don't like that very much. I'm a avid user of Slate Digital stuff. Their Everything bundle is like the best thing that's ever happened to audio. And so right now I just have a trimmer plugin in. I don't have it engaged, but I use it to balance the kick drum and the bass drum together. And then I just run through the virtual mix channel. This is the mix bus channel. And then I have an EQ on there just for some color, but I also sometimes will take a little bit out of 400 to 600. Then I move into the ABC Rack, which is their compression units for mix buses. And so the top one, I selected a CLA Rock preset, but I have bypassed the red, which is what the Rock is, so I don't even use that. But if you look at FG Gray here, that's the SSL bus compressor, and it's probably my favorite compressor in the whole world. I use it on every mix bus, and then I run into their version of a Fairchild, so it's a MU variable compressor, and I use that just to widen it out slightly. I'm only hitting about 1 dB of gain reduction on the mix bus though. Then another EQ, I add some top end and a little bit of low end, and then the magic starts to happen with the tape machine from Slate. This thing is a beast. I don't know what in the world it does, but it makes it sound super groovy and super awesome. And then finally, I am not a huge advocate for like gimmicky plugins with, I don't know, Signature Series or this artist used it or whatever. But I absolutely love this plugin. It's by Greg Wells. It's by Waves, but Greg Wells plugin. And I don't know what it does either, but it's like a magic knob that makes it sound great. So I put that at the end of mine. I have this True Verb down here just in case it doesn't sound live enough. That's the one hard thing about mixing a live stream is it has to sound live, and I'm used to recording and mixing in a studio environment. So that's one of the things I really struggle with. So let me engage all of that on the mix bus and let you hear what it sounds like. yeah, you can tell it's already doing something to it, so that's pretty cool. All right, and then I then will move on to my individual instrument buses. So um, you can see these right here. They're all in dark blue. So I have my drums channel, a drums crushed slash squashed channel, and then I have my mix bus for instruments, which is everything but drums, and then my verb and delay, which is all verbs and delays, and then my mix bus for vocals. So let me engage what I have on the drums. I've got the FG Red, which is a Focusrite compressor. It's modeled after a famous Focusrite Red compressor. And Chris Lord Alge uses these. He's one of my favorite mixers. It really makes the drums punch. From there, I have just a little bit of Revival, which is another free plugin. And then I have the virtual mix bus on this one as well, set to the Neve channel. So let me add those in. Cool. And then I have just some mad compression and a little bit of distortion with the stock Avid plugins, cutting out some of the harshness around 3K, and I'm adding that in just to taste, along with two other parallel channels over here. We have a kick parallel channel, a snare parallel channel, and then two more buses for drums. So I'm going to add all that in. It's just compression. The kick and snare are gated as well. So let's see what that does. Cool. Yeah, that's really starting to liven those drums up. So I do the same process basically for the instruments, and as for the reverb, I really like to carve out a lot of low end because it muddies everything up. The room that we are in at our church doesn't have a whole lot of low end, mid range, low end kind of grossness, and so I want to emulate that room as best as I possibly can. All right, so I've got all the instruments and the drums, and I'm just going to go ahead and mute the vocals. You can just hear what it sounds like with just the buses on the instruments and drums. Cool. And then let's move on to the vocals. I absolutely love this Puig Child. It's the Fairchild emulation from Waves. It's my go-to for everything vocal, whether it's live or in the studio or actually in a live environment in a concert. I love this thing. And then I run it into the VMR. This little custom series lift. I watched a video of Chris Lord Alge mixing with it and fell in love with it. It's so good for bringing the vocals forward in the mix. And then I just actually take a little bit out around 3K so it doesn't sound harsh. Let's hear what that sounds like. Yeah, it's a pretty big difference. So let's hear what the difference is after everything we just did. Yeah, starting to sound nice. Okay, so let's move on to what reverbs I've got. I've run a ridiculous amount of reverbs, and I understand that. But I really love adding different types of character and mixing all of those reverbs together, and it sounds absolutely huge. And so I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but you can tell I've got like a million instances of Deverb up. I would actually really like to use a different reverb plugin, but I've run so many of them that my computer can barely handle adding anything else. So sue me, right? The next most important thing, in my opinion, outside of the mix buses and the reverbs, as you can tell, I've got like just 6 drum rooms. and I blend those to taste. None of them are super loud, but with all of that added in, it really, really livens up the sound. I've watched a couple of videos of people who have done this technique, and it really makes a difference. As far as the Browerizing thing that I mentioned at first, every one of these mix buses that I use have a different type of compression on them with different release times, so it kind of gives like an organic movement. I know it's not exactly the way that Brower does it, but it works. So, all right, let's move on to the drums. That's the next most important thing for me. Take those triggers off. So I do trigger the snare drum. There's a snare drum from I Want That Sound that I love it, and I can't get anything to sound like it. So I do trigger the snare. Everything else is live. So let's look at the kick drum. I picked up this plugin. It's the Drum Forge EQ for 4 drums. I picked it up, and it is awesome. Man, it sounds good. So I'm just going to solo out these drums, and I want you to hear the difference after I add the EQ. So there's width. Yeah, man, that feels like cheating almost. It's super easy. You just use your ears. Turn up if you want some more punch, or turn it up if you want more clarity or attack. It's fantastic. It's like a $50 plugin. I would suggest it strongly. I run that into the Slate virtual channel. The virtual channel is awesome. I've got the drum bus set to the Neve preamp, so I've got this set to the SSL 4K E channel. And I like blending those two together because the Neve's a little warmer and this is a little brighter, so it gives you the best of both worlds. And then I'm running it into just a little bit of EQ. It's about a 2K or a 2 decibel boost, around 50, and just a little bit of high end for the attack. And I'm compressing it, but not super hard. So I'm compressing just about 3 dB of compression. And that goes for pretty much every single one of these drums. And so I'm using the DFQ. You can select right here which instrument it is. So I've got all of those on the drums except for the snare drum, and I'm just using the EQ from the Slate package. I'm also using an 1176 blue. This modern blue that Slate has is something that they created, and it's kind of a mixture between what sounds like to me an SSL channel strip compressor mixed with an 1176 blue. So it's got that mid-range, but it also has that smoothness of the SSL. So let's hear the drums with and without the compression and EQ. Yeah, that sounds nice. All right, let's move on to the bass. So I watched a video of the guy who mixed Kings of Leon, Jakir King. If I messed that name up, I apologize. From West Virginia, I barely can speak English here. But I watched him, and the way that he does his bass is he'll set a trimmer plugin or some type of metering plugin and hit the kick drum to 0. So it would be a VU meter. Let me show you here. So if he had this VU meter right here, he would set his kick to 0, and then he would adjust the trimmer until he's hitting -3 on the VU meter. So kick stays at 0 like this, and the VU meter is going to try to stay at 3. From there, he'll bring in the bass guitar in order for it to become up to 0. And for someone who mixes, I mix a lot every week because we do this every single weekend. It's a really quick way to make sure that your bass and your kick drum are working well together, and then one's not overpowering and one's not muddying up the other one. With that being said, I've got a little bit of EQing and compression on this. I pretty much run the virtual channel on everything. I've got a lot of high end added to the bass because this particular bass player did not have very much bite in his bass tone. And so I've added a little 1K, a little 2K boost. But I've taken a whole lot out around 200. It was pretty muddy there. Added a little bit of 50, but then I've also cut around 38. So it adds a little bit of low end, but then it kind of takes away some of that to get out of the way of the kick drum there. And I'm compressing at about 2 to 3 dB. So I don't want to hit everything super hard with compression, but I do want it to move a little bit. From there, I have a send and return. So I send it to these three, actually 5 channels. One's a bass amp sim, so I've got the Sans amp on there. I'm just kind of making it a little distorted. Then I've got this high-end stereo. I like to use that for bass players who play a lot up in the upper register of the bass. I can spread that part out and make it wide. And then this is just a little bit of a low-end bump with some EQ. So I kind of blend those into taste, and all of it's right here on this VCA master. So I can control all of the bass channels by one fader once I get them blended to taste. So let's go ahead and see what it sounds like. I'll take the vocals out again, and let's just hear what it sounds like with just the bass and the drums. Yeah, so that bass and the kick drum really sit well together. Moving on from there, I like to go straight to the vocals. You can see that there's so much reverb and delay here. But please don't judge. I promise I'm not drowning everything in reverb and delay. All right, so we cheat and we tune, and you can, once again, you can sue us. We really like to have a quality product for the people who can't access our church in person, and so we tune just like any studio recording would be. I have a really, really slow attack for the tuner. This is just auto-tune, the cheap version. In a studio setting, I would use Melodyne, but this works really well for quick stuff. From there, I take out a lot of 2400. I really, really don't like harsh vocal sounds, and that frees up some headroom for me to be able to boost some pleasant frequencies later. Okay, out of there, I'm running once again into the virtual channel. This is on the lead vocal, by the way. I'm adding a little bit of 200, but I'm also cutting almost up to 100. And then I'm adding just a little bit of slight compression. I'll run into another VMR, and I'm adding some top end here, around 8K. This SSL emulation 8K sounds wonderful. I would strongly suggest it's like $14 a month to get the Slate Everything bundle, and they have some amazing stuff. Then I add a little bit of 4.5K. Narrowed the Q there. Then a 2.5K, that's where you can get some bite for the vocal. I put that back in after I cut out some of the nasty stuff in the beginning, so we're kind of boosting some good frequencies here. A little bit more of a high pass, a little bit less of 122. More compression. I love, once again, this modern 1176. And it sounds killer on vocals. And finally, I'm kind of topping it off with some shimmer from this free plugin Revival. It's kind of just a harmonic enhancer, and it sounds really good on vocals as well. Then I'm de-essing here, and because I'm mixing like 8 songs on a Saturday night before we get ready to stream on Sunday morning, I'm not doing much automation, so I'm using Vocal Writer to automate. So I pretty much have copied all those settings and adjusted the EQs for all the vocals. They're being sent to all the reverbs, and like I said, I'm just blending those to taste. From there, I'm mixing all the keys parts, including our track. So we use a click track and backing track. It usually doesn't have a ton of instruments, just some auxiliary stuff in it. But I'm using that as a keyboard part, essentially, and I'm not doing hardly anything to it at all, just sending it to, I call these orchestra reverbs because I want them to sound as if you're in some big orchestra room that you'd be in an auditorium and a whole orchestra was playing, you get that sense of immersive audio. And so I've sent those to that. It's basically like a giant room microphone. We not have the capability of recording actual room mics, so you have to make do with what you have. The guitars, I've got them. When I first started mixing, I panned everything LCR, so hard left, hard right, and right down the center. But I've noticed that for this live stuff, I usually try to watch a video, the video that was captured, to make sure that I've panned the guitars and the keys and all that stuff in the proper places that they were in on stage, because it's really, really weird to have a guitar player on the far right of the stage and accidentally pan him to the left. It just doesn't look realistic. So I've tried to pan those as as good as I can to make it look realistic on the video. I'm adding a little bit more of the right around 8K. That's a great frequency on this EQ specifically. And then I'm adding a little bit of 1K. I'm taking a whole lot out of the low end because there's a ton of rumble from the amp microphones picking up stuff from the kick drum and the bass guitar and all that good stuff. Once again, I'm running to the virtual channel, and yeah, I'm not doing a whole lot to the guitars. If you notice, I have Maxim at the end of most of my plug-in chains, and that's only because I don't want anything to clip. And I'm working so fast, usually on Saturday nights, because if you're doing this on a weekly basis, you really want to get it done as quickly as possible. So I get home from our Saturday service after mixing front of house and sit down. I don't want to spend like tons of hours on this. So we try to make sure the gain staging is correct going in. And if it's a little hot, I've got that Maxim on there just to make sure that we're not clipping. This is guitar 2. Once again, it's kind of the same setup. I've scooped out a little bit more right here because I added it to the other guitar. And so I really want those to complement each other. Sometimes if you watch the stream on a cell phone, it turns it into mono, depending on which cell phone you have. And so we really want every instrument to cut through in mono and not have to rely only on panning for stereo. I think that that's about it, except for the track. I just blend that into taste. But let's go ahead and play this. And I'm going to play with everything on, so the final product, and then I'm going to take the all the plugins off, and let's see what the difference is. Sorry, I forgot to unmute the vocal there for a second, but you got it at the end. So let's hear it without everything on, and then I'll do it one more time. That is a pretty big difference. We've, like I said, we've had a lot of success from our online campus so far. We launched it in November, and it's just been really great to be able to reach different people for Jesus that we didn't think we were going to be able to reach, that don't necessarily come to our campus. And so that's pretty much all I do to mix our online service. I hope that this was helpful. I know I went super fast. It didn't go super in depth to every plugin, but it gives you kind of a look at what it's like to set up a session like this, and how to make everything kind of punch out. I'm going to include the link to this session. You guys are more than welcome to use it however you need to. And yeah, I appreciate you watching. Thanks. Bye.